stain. The white sperm is the one which is a live sperm. Why it is important? If you have a case where all sperms are immotile and you want to send this patient for intracytoplasmic sperm injection or ICSI, you want to know if all sperms are actually dead, he cannot have child by any means. But they are just non-motile and some of them are alive like this. Then the patient can try ICSI and can become a father. These are just to show you different methodologies and how sperms looks. There is a test called hypoosmotic swelling test. As I told you, since semen count couldn't predict the fertilizing capability of sperm, we were very eager to look for a test which could predict the fertilizing capability of the sperm. So we thought if we expose these sperms to hypoosmotic fructose solution, and if the sperm membrane is a biologically semi-permeable membrane and it has a fully intact physiological function, this hypoosmotic solution will be absorbed by the sperm head and there will be a tail curling, and this would correlate very well with the fertilizing capability of the sperms. So this was the principle of this test, and we used to thought that anybody with more than 50% of the sperm showing the tail curling have good fertilizing potential. Now we know that this is not the test for fertilizing ability of the sperms, but this is a test which is again a viability test, becomes very useful at the time of IVF. IVF or ICSI, when they are doing and when they want to select a sperm which is non-motile, if they expose it to HOS solution and the sperm shows tail curling, they know it's a live sperm and they can use it for intracytoplasmic sperm injection. This is how an HOS end result will look. Under phase contrast microscope, we will see the tail curling here. On staining, it would appear like this. Now, in this particular case, more than 50% of the sperms are showing positive HOS, indicating good viability and probably good fertilizing capability, though we don't take it anymore as a test for fertilizing ability of the sperm. Then we also came to know there is something called as now, before we proceed further, I just wanted to ask you this question because we see this very often. 4 years infertility, the semen volume is 0.3, azoospermia, pH is 6, fructose is negative. What are the possibilities? The possibility is, if we go to see, first is incomplete semen discharge. Many men under laboratory condition will not discharge fully. There is no seminal vesicular contraction, so they will just bring out prostatic secretion and urethral fluid. So if you ask the question to the patient, your semen volume is usually a teaspoon or a drop. So he will say a teaspoon. Then you know that he has this problem, which is incomplete semen discharge. He could be having ejaculatory duct obstruction. He could be having congenital absence of vas. Congenital absence of vas is always associated with congenital absence of seminal vesicles. He could be having a retrograde ejaculation because of diabetes or some spinal injury. These are the possibilities when you see fructose negative, small volume and an acidic pH. But when I ask this question, the answers I get is vasectomy. Now vasectomy is occurring between the level of testes above the seminal vesicle. So not a cause for absence of fructose. Obstruction in the vas is not the cause for absence of fructose. Vasoepididymal obstruction, it is between testes and epididymis, not beyond the seminal vesicle, so not the cause of semen fructose to be negative. So please remember, when you get a semen fructose negative and a very low volume and an acidic pH, the possibilities are outlined 4, and most of the azoospermia patient where you have a block in this region and fructose is positive, they can undergo a surgery called as vasoepididymal anastomosis and their sperm count can be restored. Now this is case 3. You have a 2.3 million sperm count, a normal FSH LH testosterone. Does it mean that the testicular function is normal? The answer is no. Normal FSH does not mean normal testicular function. Now this is another impression most of you have, is FSH or LH being normal means a normal sperm formation is not right, because the FSH feedback is with inhibin, and inhibin is produced in the Sertoli cells of the testes. It doesn't require mature sperm to produce an inhibin. So a normal FSH does not mean there is a normal testicular function. In fact, if you see severely oligospermic men below counts of 5 million per ml, about 50 to 60% of the men will have a normal FSH. But contrary is always right. If you have a high FSH, which is more than 2 times the upper normal range, it always represents abnormal testicular function. This is a test called sperm DNA fragmentation test, which is increasingly being asked, because as I told you, semen count was unable to predict. In majority of cases, the ability of semen count to predict fertilization was only about 60%. So to fill this gap, there is a test called as sperm DNA fragmentation assay, and now we know that DNA fragmentation index more than 30%. In spite of normal semen count, this person will never conceive by natural means. So this has become a very clinically important test for all generally asked in these situations: cases of unexplained infertility, repeated IVF failures, repeated miscarriages, varicocele patient, advanced age group, exposure to harmful chemical. And as I have told you, anybody with a sperm DNA fragmentation which is above 30% has a very poor fertility potential and very poor chance of pregnancy. Now why this picture I am showing you? You know, these are primates which are closely related to human beings. Now if you see the testicular size of chimpanzee, it's, as I told you, one of the largest in animal kingdom. An average chimpanzee sperm count will be about 2.5 to 5 billion sperms per ml. Gorilla, which is about 400 pounds, against chimpanzee's weight, which is about 100 pounds, the testicular size is very poor, less than a human testes. So if you go to see, this is just to show you the size of gorilla vis-a-vis a human being. These are very large animal, but very poor testicular size. So if you were to do a comparison, you will see a human testes both combined weigh about 40 to 50 grams, a chimpanzee testes 120 grams, and a gorilla testes half of human. In spite of this, what is the importance of this? Why I wanted to show you this? It was to show you that we have talked everything about seminology without talking about the testicular size or the testicular volume. So no, every single test is meaningless unless you have examined the patient naked and measured the testicular volume. There is a direct correlation between the testicular volume in men with the ability to produce the sperm count. In other words, a normal testicular volume is 20 cc. If I have examined a patient and the testicular volume is 10 cc, without doing semen test, without doing FSH, without doing sperm DNA fragmentation, I know that the ability of this gentleman to father is going to be very, very poor. So it is that important. So you must remember that testicular volume is a physical criteria. How do we measure it? We measure it, there is something called as a Prader's orchidometer. So these are oval shaped, egg shaped balls with volume written on it, and we match the ball with the testicular size, so we know the testicular size. And if it is less than 10 ml, we know for sure that any further investigation, including a testicular biopsy, is only of academic interest. So very, very important to examine the patient before you just look at the reports. Now from seminology we are coming to something which is totally in your day-to-day routine practice. I wanted to show you this because I see that there is increasing demands from the lab to report eGFR on the basis of serum creatinine values. So whether we should be reporting eGFR? Yes. Whether we should be reporting absolute values? No. Why? I will come to that. We should be reporting values which are anything which puts the patient in stage 3, that is GFR less than 60 ml per minute. We should be reporting as greater than 60 ml per minute or lesser than 60 ml per minute. I will not go into details. We have enough data to show that 45 to 59 is much higher risk compared to any other category, and these are the patients who will not even reach the stage of end-stage renal disease. Before that, they will die of some cardiac event or stroke or heart failure. Most of them will die of that and won't reach the stage of stage 5 kidney disease. This is very important because in India, our young healthy people tend to have stage 2 kidney disease. Why? That is because there was a study in India that the average creatinine clearance in India of a renal donor in Apollo Hospital or Manipal Hospital studies is about 85 ml per minute vis-a-vis the reference range of 120 ml mentioned in literature. So if your kidney donors who are absolutely normal have about 20% lower GFR, your population which is healthy, if you apply Western guidelines, your young healthy population is going to be in stage. There is a large survey done in Bangalore where they have shown in college going population, if you apply this criteria, about 20 to 30% of young Indians will fall in stage 2 CKD because they have GFRs which are 84, 85, and that's the reason when I say you should report more than 60 or less than 60, because you will be raising an alarm if you say that they have stage 2 kidney disease in an absolutely normal individual. So please remember that. Then when we are discussing about creatinine, we know all these things. What is not known is what alterations can happen in creatinine because of various physiological conditions or various pharmacological treatment. For example, I will give you an example that serum creatinine, if you have a blood pressure which is 160 by 90 and a create which is 0.9, and this blood pressure gets controlled by medication and becomes 110 by 70, the fact of lowering the blood pressure itself will raise the creatinine because the hydrostatic pressure has gone down. So that doesn't mean patient has worsened. Similarly, if I use a ACE inhibitor, the creatinine will go up. We know that. If I use amlodipine, which is a calcium channel blocker, which dilates your afferent arteriole, raises your intraglomerular pressure and intraglomerular filtration, the creatinine value will come down. If I use finfibrate, which is a triglyceride lowering medication, my creatinine will go up by about 20 to 30%. So this is important to know because in your day-to-day practice, if you report GFRs in absolute values, just imagine the consequences that you have a 85 GFR in a patient before putting him on ACE inhibitor or before starting him on finfibrate therapy, then next time he comes to you, you report 70. Patient is the same. This is a hemodynamic adjustment. So nowadays we rely also on inclusion of cystatin in estimated GFR because instead of MDRD equations, we have started relying on CKD EPI equation, which also has cystatin component. Cystatin is not normally used. Why? One, it is more expensive. It's a better marker than creatinine, but most of our Indian patients have their previous reports as serum creatinine. So to monitor a patient, he has no previous cystatin report. So you cannot say whether the patient has deteriorated or improved unless you do creatinine. But if the patient is going into stage 3 renal disease, then it's important to add cystatin and do a equation with cystatin, creatinine, and sometimes with microalbumin create ratio to give you a correct staging of GFR. So this is the former MDRD equation. This I have already shared with you that the estimated GFR needs to be reported, but better not to report absolute value, otherwise the clinician or the patient needs to be explained each time. This is the EPI equation. This is cystatin C inclusion would alter